All right, this video is about proportions. Proportions are just two equal ratios. You know that if somebody tells you that 6 out of 10 kids like chocolate ice cream, that's the same as 3 kids out of 5. Those are proportions. They look like equal fractions there. Proportions are really helpful in problem solving because they're easy to solve. Suppose let's look at an example that we know that a 2014 Ford hybrid, I'm not going to, can travel 587 miles on 12.3 gallons of gas. What if you only have enough money to buy 3 gallons of gas and you want to know how far you can drive on 3 gallons? Set up a proportion. Be sure when you write these proportions that you're labeling your ratios. You can go 587 miles if you have 12.3 gallons of gas. So the question is, how many miles can you go on 3 gallons? To solve proportions, we usually use a method called cross multiplication. We multiply these two numbers together, and we multiply these two numbers together. In this case, we would have 12.3 times x has to equal 587 times 3. So I have 12.3 times x. If I use my calculator, 587 times 3 is 1,761. So to finish solving, what we have to do is we need to get 1x. We need to find out what x is all by itself. So we divide by 12.3. We're getting that variable by itself. That cancels out, and I get x equals 1761 divided by 12.3 is 143 miles. I'm not going to round. I could put 0.2. So if you can only afford 3 gallons of gas, you can still go 143 miles with your Ford hybrid. Let's look at another example where we could use our knowledge of proportions. The USA has a population of, this was back in 2012, 316 million. Actually, now our population is closer to 331 million. This is in 2012 and used 722.1 billion cubic meters of natural gas. Okay. Texas had a population of 26.1 million, same year back in 2012. If Texas uses natural gas at the same rate as the rest of the country, how much did it use? In 2012. All of this is from 2012. Well, let's think. We know that 316 million people, we don't even really, that million people use 722.1 billion. This was people, this was cubic meters of natural gas. So the question becomes, well, Texas is only 26.1, but it's the same labels, million people. How many billion cubic meters of gas? In other words, if our labels match, we can do this. The X is going to get multiplied by the 316. We don't need the million because we have matching labels on both sides. They effectively will cancel out. So 316x equals, and then I have to multiply the 722.1 times the 26.1. So 316x, 722.1 times 26.1, and I get 18,846.81. If I divide to find out what x is, and I get x is equal to, and I'm going to do it to the nearest tenth, 59.6. And remember, this was billion cubic meters of natural gas. But it solved exactly like the previous problem. If things are being used at the same rate, we can just set up a proportion. Another place that we can use proportions are percents. Percents are a type of proportion. They compare part to a whole. The whole is considered to be 100%. This is going to be some unknown percent. So let's find a situation where we know part of a whole. 1 out of 16 women in the U.S. develop lung cancer. That's all women. I believe that is the correct statistic. If we know that we currently have 330 million women in the U.S., we can answer a couple of questions. How many get not breast cancer, how many get lung cancer? And what percent get lung cancer? Okay. If we want to say, do the percent one first, it's really easy. 1 out of 16. 1 is the part, 16 is the total number. 1 out of every 16. What percent is that going to be? We cross multiply that. That gives me 16x equals 100. And x will equal, well, let me show all of my work. I divide by 16. That's about 6.25%. Another one, this other question, if we just want to know how many people get lung cancer, we could say, well, I know that this is one cancer person out of every 16 women. The United States has not 300 people. Let's fix that. There's 230. Let's assume half the people are women. So 330 million divided by 2 is 165 million. Now, some of those are going to be very young girls and babies. They're not going to develop lung cancer for a long time. But statistically right now, those are the odds. So how many cancer patients would we expect out of 165 million women? Now, since this is just women and this is 6 million women, we may want to either do one of two things. We can leave it like this and say how many million cancer patients. That's probably the easiest. And then we can just cross multiply. If I multiply 16 times x, and then I multiply 1 times 165, I'm ready to divide. Divide by 16, divide by 16. And that comes out to be about 10.3 million women with cancer. Notice we could have done it the other way. We could have said, what is 6.25% of 165 million? We think that 1 out of 16 is 6.25%. That can be worked away. We've been doing our percentages, 0.0625 times 165 million. And that comes out to equal, of course, the same thing, 10.3 million women with cancer. Let's do one more example, our last one. There's several problems that are similar to this on your quiz. Suppose they tell you, that we don't know what we'll say it's Starbucks. It says a popular coffee. Suppose that Starbucks tries to put in 3 coffee shops per 100,000 people. Now, They may not do that everywhere because truthfully, Angelina County is almost 100,000. And you might think 3 coffee shops is too many. But if you just look at Lufkin, Lufkin's like 30,000, maybe a little bigger. 1 coffee shop, that sounds about right. We have 1 Starbucks. So, suppose there's a city in Texas. Okay, let's see if I can find out the population of Houston. I'll Google that on my phone super quick. Houston has a population of 2,320,000 people. So how many Starbucks would we expect we would find in Houston? Well, there's 3 Starbucks for every 100,000 people. So we would expect X number of Starbucks for 2,320,000 people. Again, we cross multiply. That's going to be 100,000 times X. And this is going to be 3 times 2,320,000. So I have 100,000 X. And if I multiply 3 times that, 3 times I get 6,960,000. Now we're ready to divide. So we're going to divide both sides by 100,000. And that comes out to be 69.6. So I would expect there to be about 70 Starbucks in Houston, Texas. I have no idea how close that is to right. All right, that finishes up our video. I'll make a quiz over solving proportions. Hopefully this will help you be successful.